The Silent Watchers. When hope fades. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood in the observation deck of the research station Pathfinder, staring at the dying star system before her. She had been monitoring deep space signals for 8 years, searching for signs of intelligent life beyond Earth. Most days brought nothing but cosmic static and the occasional natural phenomenon. Today was different. The signal had started 3 hours ago. It was weak, fragmented, and carried the unmistakable patterns of distress. Sarah's team had worked frantically to decode it, running it through every translation protocol humanity had developed. What they found made her blood run cold. The message spoke of a species called the Zervani, aquatic beings who lived on a world they called Thalassia. Their planet was under siege by an empire known as the Drekker Collective. The message was old, transmitted weeks ago across the vast distances of space. By now, the Zervani might already be extinct. Dr. James Chen, the station's lead linguist, approached her with a tablet displaying the decoded message. His hands were shaking slightly. The details were horrifying. The Drekker had surrounded Thalassia with a blockade fleet, cutting off all escape routes. They were systematically destroying the planet's defensive satellites and orbital stations. The Zervani had sent distress calls to the Galactic Assembly, an ancient coalition of advanced species that supposedly maintained order in this region of space. No one had answered. Sarah read through the message again, her jaw tightening with each line. The Zervani described themselves as peaceful explorers, scientists who had made first contact with the Drekker only months earlier. They had offered friendship and knowledge sharing. The Drekker had responded with violence, demanding access to Thalassia's unique underwater mineral deposits. When the Zervani refused, the invasion began. The research station Pathfinder was not a military vessel. It carried a crew of 43 scientists, engineers, and support staff. Their mission was observation and study, not combat. They had basic defensive shields and a few mining lasers adapted for clearing space debris. Against a military fleet, they would last perhaps 30 seconds. But Sarah could not stop thinking about the final lines of the message. The Zervani elder who had sent it, someone named Keeper Maris, had written that they did not expect rescue. They only wanted someone to know they had existed, to remember their songs and stories after they were gone. They did not want to disappear from the universe without leaving any trace behind. A decision in the dark. Sarah called an emergency meeting in the station's main conference room. The crew assembled quickly, their faces showing confusion and concern. She projected the Zervani message on the main screen and let them read it in silence. The room grew heavy with the weight of what they were seeing. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the station's security chief, was the first to speak. He was a former military officer who had joined the research mission seeking a quieter life after years of service. His voice was measured and calm, but Sarah could see the conflict in his eyes. He asked the question everyone was thinking. What could they possibly do? They were scientists, not soldiers. Their ship was designed for research, not warfare. Sarah had expected this reaction. She had asked herself the same questions over and over during the past 3 hours. The logical answer was to forward the message to Earth Command and wait for instructions. By the time a proper response was organized, it would be far too late. The Zervani would be dead, and humanity would have done nothing. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the station's biologist, stood up from her seat. She was normally quiet during meetings, preferring to let others debate while she focused on her work. But now her voice was strong and clear. She reminded everyone why they had come to space in the first place. They had left Earth to explore, to learn, to make contact with other intelligent beings. They had dreamed of finding others like themselves, species who valued knowledge and peace. Now they had found exactly that, and those beings were dying. The debate continued for nearly an hour. Some argued that intervening would be suicide, that they had families back on Earth who deserved to see them again. Others pointed out that the Pathfinder was the only ship within range. If they did nothing, no one would help. The Galactic Assembly had already abandoned the Zervani. Earth was too far away. They were the only hope, however slim. Engineer Thomas Park proposed a different perspective. He had been studying the Drekker fleet composition based on the sensor data included in the Zervani message. The blockade consisted of 15 warships, far more than the Pathfinder could handle in direct combat. But the Drekker seemed focused on the planet itself, concentrating their forces in low orbit. Their outer perimeter was thinner, guarded by only 3 or 4 vessels. If the Pathfinder approached carefully, using asteroid fields for cover, they might be able to slip through and reach the planet's surface. Sarah listened to every argument, every suggestion, every fear. She understood the risks better than anyone. As commander, the final decision rested with her. She could order the ship to turn away, to return to safer space and report what they had found. No one would blame her. It would be the sensible choice, the one that kept her crew alive. But she kept thinking about Keeper Maris writing that final message, knowing that death was coming, hoping only that someone somewhere would remember. She thought about humanity's own history, the times when others had stood by and done nothing while people suffered. She thought about what it meant to call yourself civilized, to claim you valued life and dignity and justice. The vote. Sarah made her decision, but she refused to make it alone. She called for a vote. Every crew member would decide whether to continue toward Thalassia or return to Earth. It had to be unanimous. If even one person voted to turn back, they would honor that choice. This mission required everyone working together, trusting each other completely. Anything less would fail. The votes came in one by one. The engineers voted to go. The scientists voted to go. The medical staff voted to go. Lieutenant Webb was last. He stood slowly, looking around at his crewmates, then at Sarah. He had served in 3 combat zones during his military career. He knew what war looked like, what it cost. He voted to go. The Pathfinder changed course, turning away from Earth and toward the Thalassia system. They had 3 weeks of travel ahead of them. 3 weeks to prepare, to plan, to figure out how 43 researchers might possibly stand against a military empire. Sarah returned to her quarters that night and sat in the darkness, wondering if she had just ordered everyone to their deaths. But deep down, she knew she had made the only choice she could live with. Someone had called for help across the stars. Humanity had answered. Racing against time. Preparation. The Pathfinder's corridors hummed with activity as the crew transformed their research vessel into something that might survive a combat zone. Engineer Thomas Park worked 18-hour shifts in the engine room, coaxing every bit of extra speed from the aging propulsion system. Every hour they saved might mean the difference between arriving to help survivors or arriving to witness ruins. Dr. Elena Rodriguez converted one of the biology labs into an emergency medical bay. She had treated injuries before, mostly accidents during field research, but never combat wounds. She studied military medical protocols, downloaded every trauma procedure she could find in the ship's database, and tried not to think about how inadequate her preparation might be. Her assistant, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, helped organize medical supplies and prepared the cryogenic pods in case they needed to evacuate wounded Zervani. Lieutenant Marcus Webb gathered the station's small security team and began training sessions. They had 6 personnel with military experience and another dozen volunteers willing to learn. Their weapons were limited to stun batons and a handful of plasma cutters meant for cutting through asteroid rock. Webb adapted mining equipment into improvised defensive tools, knowing that creativity might be their only advantage. He had fought against superior forces before during his military service, and he understood that unconventional tactics often succeeded where traditional approaches failed. Sarah spent her days on the bridge, monitoring communications and refining their approach strategy. She contacted Earth Command, knowing the message would take days to reach them and more days for any response to return. She sent detailed reports about the Zervani situation and the Pathfinder's decision to intervene. She did not ask for permission because it was already too late for that. She simply informed them of what was happening, so humanity would know what its people had chosen to do. The nights were harder. Sarah found herself unable to sleep, lying in her bunk and staring at the ceiling. She thought about the crew members who had trusted her leadership, who had voted to risk everything for strangers they had never met. She thought about their families on Earth, who might never see them again. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her like a physical force. Learning about the Zervani. Dr. James Chen spent the journey studying everything the Zervani had included in their distress message. They had attached cultural files, hoping that whoever found their message would at least understand who they were. Chen discovered a species that reminded him of Earth's ancient philosophers and artists. The Zervani valued knowledge above all else, believing that understanding the universe was the highest purpose any being could pursue. Their cities were built in the deep oceans of Thalassia, massive structures of living coral that had been grown and shaped over thousands of years. They had developed technology that worked in harmony with their ocean environment rather than dominating it. Their power systems used thermal vents and tidal forces. Their transportation networks followed natural currents. They had achieved spaceflight not through rockets and explosions, but through gravity manipulation technology that let them gently rise from the ocean into the stars. Chen shared these discoveries with the crew during evening briefings. He showed them images of Zervani architecture, beautiful spiral structures that seemed to dance in the ocean currents. He played recordings of their music, haunting melodies created by water flowing through carefully crafted instruments. He read their poetry, verses about the joy of discovery and the interconnectedness of all living things. The crew fell silent as they listened. These were not abstract aliens, not just signals from space. These were people with culture and dreams, families and hopes. They created beauty and sought knowledge. They were worth saving, worth fighting for, worth risking everything to protect. First contact with the enemy. 12 days into their journey, the Pathfinder's sensors detected something unexpected. A small vessel appeared on their scanners, moving through an asteroid field roughly 2 light-hours ahead. The ship's design matched Drekker specifications according to the data the Zervani had provided. It appeared to be a scout ship, probably searching for any Zervani vessels that might have escaped the blockade. Sarah faced a difficult choice. They could hide among the asteroids and wait for the scout to pass, maintaining their stealth approach. Or they could attempt to disable the scout ship, preventing it from reporting their presence to the main fleet. Both options carried risks. Hiding meant the scout might detect them anyway and raise an alarm. Attacking meant revealing their capabilities and potentially alerting the Drekker that someone was coming. Lieutenant Webb offered a third option. They could try to communicate with the Drekker scout, claiming to be an independent merchant vessel passing through the region. It was a gamble, but it might give them information about the current situation at Thalassia while keeping the Pathfinder's true intentions hidden. Sarah approved the plan. The communication officer, Lieutenant Priya Desai, opened a channel to the Drekker scout. She used the standard galactic trade language, identifying the Pathfinder as the merchant ship Horizon's Edge, carrying scientific equipment and looking for trading opportunities. The response came after several tense minutes. The Drekker captain appeared on screen, a reptilian being with bronze-colored scales and cold yellow eyes. He seemed suspicious but not immediately hostile. He asked what the Pathfinder was doing in this sector, noting that it was far from any established trade routes. Lieutenant Desai delivered her prepared story smoothly. They were explorers seeking new markets, following old star maps that suggested inhabited systems in this direction. She asked if the Drekker knew of any civilizations nearby that might be interested in trading for advanced sensors and medical technology. The Drekker captain's expression changed, showing something that might have been dark amusement. He informed them that there had been a civilization in this sector, but they had proven unreasonable and were being dealt with. He advised the Pathfinder to turn back, as the area was now under Drekker military control and unauthorized vessels were not permitted. Sarah watched the exchange from her command chair, her fists clenched. She wanted to demand answers, to challenge the Drekker's right to attack peaceful beings. But she remained silent, letting Desai continue the deception. They needed information more than they needed to voice their anger. Desai thanked the Drekker captain for the warning and asked how long the military operations might continue, suggesting the Pathfinder could wait in the area if trading opportunities might open up afterward. The captain's response was chilling. He said there would be no opportunities. The planet was being processed for resources. Its previous inhabitants would not be requiring trade goods anymore. The promise. The communication ended, and silence filled the Pathfinder's bridge. The crew had heard the casual way the Drekker captain spoke about genocide, as if discussing a mining operation rather than the extinction of an entire species. Engineer Park broke the silence first, his voice shaking with rage. He asked how beings could become so cold, so empty of compassion that they could speak of murder without any emotion. Dr. Rodriguez reminded them that Earth's own history contained similar darkness. Humans had committed terrible acts against each other, justified cruelty with economic interests, turned people into resources to be exploited. Understanding evil did not excuse it, but it did mean they recognized the choice before them. They could be the humans who stood by and did nothing, or they could be the humans who fought against darkness even when the odds seemed impossible. Sarah stood and addressed her crew. She told them that the Drekker captain had just confirmed their worst fears. The Zorvani were running out of time. The attack was not just military conquest but complete extermination. If the Pathfinder turned back now, they would be abandoning an entire species to death. She asked if anyone wanted to change their vote, to reconsider their decision to intervene. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence was their answer. The Pathfinder continued toward Thalassia, moving faster now, abandoning some of their stealth in favor of speed. They had 9 days left until they reached the system. 9 days to finalize their plans. 9 days to prepare for a battle they had almost no chance of winning. But they would go anyway, because someone had called for help and humanity had promised to answer. They would keep that promise, even if it cost them everything.